right. Hello and welcome to SummerWorks Career Sneak Peek Week series featuring Jeff Rinvelt. We're delighted to have you join us. My name is Amanda DeLongchamp and I work for Amy Cell Talent. I will be facilitating today's session. With that, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Jeffrey Rinvelt. Jeff is excited to share his excitement working for small companies and giving an overview of venture capital. He is proud to be an alumnus of Western Michigan University and currently serves on the WMU Board of Trustees.
First off, I want to say that I'm so excited to do this. One of my favorite things of my career when I was going to university was having internships during the summer. I thought it really made my college career so much better because you could tie the things you were doing back into the real life, and you could also find out where things were going and start to tailor in your education basically side of it. Amanda, did you have any internships basically when you were in university at all, or?
Unfortunately, I did not, and that is actually something I would do if I could go back in time and do schooling over again. We did have some really great projects that helped a lot in my graduate program for psychology, and then I was a research assistant in undergrad, which made more sense for my degree at the time, but no internships.
I think research, programs are exactly the same, or, student teaching, all that same stuff. That's internships is the same way. But anytime that you can actually go out and know exactly what you're doing is a great way to make sure your education's so much better. My trajectory and as we talked about, I went to Western Michigan University. I never went to grad school. Most of the people in my positions have an MBA usually, or a master's or a graduate degree, but I'm one of the unusual people. I went out straight from university and started as an entrepreneur. I did a little bit of work in 5 or 6 different companies. Actually, only one of them was slightly successful, and probably none of them you would ever know about. None of them were big enough basically to make news. In between that, I actually decided that I wanted to work for a large company. I don't put this on the slide, but I worked for GM for a while and hated it. So that's why I'm trying to tell you why I hated those jobs and why I would never work for a large corporate ever again. And that's sort of what we'll get into. After that, I went to venture capital, which allowed me to start investing in companies directly. And then now for the last 10, 13 years, basically, I'm in a fund of funds, basically investing in venture capital firms. So I could talk, probably on each one of these bullets for, the whole rest of the time, but I know my partner, Chris Ryzik, who's going to be timing Thursday. So he's going to talk about venture capital and sort of dig deep into this. So I took this as a time basically to sort of do a pitch basically for why I think you should work in companies, small companies, specifically startups, because I know that more than probably in anything else. And I want to sort of tell you the joys, but also tell you the negatives, and hopefully give you some ways around those negatives. So when I talk about startup or a small company, I'm talking about companies that are usually less than 50 people, probably most are under 5 or 25. And I'm hopefully going to tell you the good or bad and why you should sort of look at these as you go forward. So let's go over the big, the important things first. Amanda talked about, the personalities and making sure you understand everything, but I think it also helps understanding the different roles. Usually when you get a large corporation, you're going to be doing something very, very specific. Sometimes it might be even, just moving certain things from one place to another. As a startup or as a small company or, under 20 people, there's always a lot of things to do. And that's sort of the definition of a startup is that they're a temporary organization looking for a reason to exist, basically, where a large corporation is just looking for, basically trying to just keep doing what they've been doing, because usually they've been in existence. So because of that, there's going to be tons of different things to do. And I can't, even today, there's still where something actually happens inside of an organization, and basically you're sort of thrust into the role of running it. My children are just in the university right now, and there's a number of times where, my daughter's working for a COVID testing, and now they need somebody to go out and draw blood. So now she's doing her phlebotomist, basically, role side of it. So, for good or bad, you're going to learn a lot of different things. This also gives you lots of different experiences, which means you can try out things and sort of understand exactly what you don't want to do. And I think that's a huge blessing, sort of understanding when you start off in a job, because you can try different things on and sort of say, hey, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I really want to do, this is what I don't want to do ever again. And you can, and then when you keep keep going through your progression, you can actually find out what's interesting. We talked about this, but there's lots of interesting work basically to be done. And usually what you're doing matters a lot. So, I don't know if you found this, Amanda, but, every job you do is critically important, and there's no backup a lot of times inside an organization. So, that whatever you do is going to have a direct impact on the corporation. With a large company, a lot of times you don't get that feeling. A lot of times you feel like you're a cog. You feel like you're just somebody who's, if you disappeared tomorrow, the company probably wouldn't even understand you. Now you don't come into work, you're sick. Everybody really wants you to have a comment to it. The other side of it you talked about, Amanda, was access to your staff, but I also like the access to management. When I started as working for small companies, you got a very good education. There's all the university jobs you guys have had and things like that, but there's a whole different perspective to running a company that you really can't get without actually doing it. So a lot of times, I know probably, Amanda, you have lots of conversations with Amy. She can tell you what's going on, what the problems with the corporation is. And this is sort of the interesting part that you don't really get at another large corporation. So you can see what's going on, what's going right, what's going bad. The last part of it, and this is usually only for a startup, basically side of it is we'll talk about, usually most startups come with an equity component. And that usually I think of as a lottery ticket. What that means is you get shares in that company. And if they exit, which is usually what a startup is trying to do, or trying to get to liquidity, you may get a fairly large paycheck. And I've done that only once in my career. I've done it as a venture capitalist, but I did that once, and it was sort of a great way. But you got to remember to think of it as a lottery ticket. It's never going to, if it happens, it's great. If it doesn't happen, you have all these other great experiences, basically why you sort of do it. So I jumped in, sort of why you should take these jobs, but I sort of want to always go over the other side of things and talk about why you wouldn't want to take these jobs. So I have to admit, they're hard to find. And this is probably, I want to drive, right into it. And basically, I think this is the number one reason. You guys are all going to, probably going to, universities or colleges, or you're already graduated, or you're going to, or you're in it. And because of that, you're going to get tons of job offers from a lot of companies. They're going to come to your career fairs. They're going to come to your career center, and they're going to show up, and they're going to want you, all you guys, especially after all the internships you basically have it. So, that's going to be easy. The harder stuff is going to be is finding these positions. So, we talked about it. Internships is a great way. This is a great way. You guys are already doing it. I'm sure Amy connected up with, Amy Cell connected you guys up with a lot of great startups, and you may be at big companies, but you might be at a really small companies too. So this is a great way to sort of, when you have the time and the inclination during your winters, when you're in universities, you can look for these companies and start targeting way beforehand. When you're actually looking for a real job, a lot of times you're sort of at your end of your career, and it is much harder. So internships, I would say this is a great way. Even if you don't work at those companies, this is a great way to sort of get plugged into these networks that, where these other companies find interns. Other ways is local support organizations. There's a number of organizations, and if you haven't figured out, like this internship program, there's a lot of them going on with Spark. There's a lot of, Spark, Ann Arbor Spark. There's Tech Town in Detroit. There's any place you go, sort of in the U.S., you're going to find entrepreneurial support organizations, and their jobs is basically to make these startups and small companies actually work. So you can go to them. I'm sure they have job boards. Amy does a great job of sort of publicizing the startup jobs, but you'll find them wherever you want to be, or with whatever area you want to be, is sort of, you can find them and basically plug into that network and get into those side of it. The last place I think, and one of the other places I'd look at is also news articles. I put up 2 news articles basically on this slide here. The first one is for Strata Oncology, sort of when it got its initial round of funding, which is down on the bottom there, if you see it, 26 million. And then there's a news article that just happened like a week ago that shows that they grade $90 million. Each one of those things means they're probably going to be hiring a lot of people. Strata just tripled in size basically because of the $90 million funding round. And if you can find those jobs, they're great places to sort of email the HR person, email the CEO, and sort of say, hey, I know you just got money. I know you're going to be hiring. I can do anything you want me to. I've been watching the company for a while. I sort of know it's exciting. So if you know somebody you want to work for, most of these people are really accessible or really easy to get the email to, and they're going to be looking for help too. They're going to be looking for anybody who can help them out. So if you find those and look at news articles, you can sort of pinpoint when people need you or when people want you, to work for them. And then the last one, I mean, you guys know better than I do. I've never really worked, I work with LinkedIn a little bit, but I'm sure as you're getting done with your careers and stuff like that, if somebody hasn't done you a tutorial in LinkedIn, you guys should do it, because it's a great way to sort of say, hey, I want to work for company X. I found out they need money. Who can give me the introduction? Who can sort of get me that warm intro? And a lot of times that means, they may not be advertising hiring, but they will probably be hiring, especially if they're growing as a company. Or even, if they don't need it, they aren't hiring, they're basically looking for good people always. So most startups I know are always looking for the best people. And if you present yourself in that right way, you're going to find those jobs much easier. So, it's hard to find, but I think it's worth it. And I think that's the biggest thing you're going to have troubles basically side of doing things.
And Jeff, I also shared with the whole group the DEI focused internship that you shared with me.
Perfect.
So it's in the chat, everyone, to look at later after this presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a great group. I actually, we just started up with another great founder inside Ann Arbor, Doug Song, and a bunch of other venture capitalists. So we're hoping that will take off. We just did our last one, and now we're hoping to do it next summer. So the other thing that you may see, banded around, and usually it's true, is a lot of times startups pay less. I mean, at this point, I'll make the pitch. If again, I was at a point of privilege. I can sort of say that I did not need a lot of money basically when I was doing these internships, and hopefully you're in the same boat. But if you are, if you can do it, I think the startups, sometimes the experience pays off more in the long term if you can invest in yourself than the longer pay basically that the more pay you're going to get at those bigger startups. The other part of it is also that lottery ticket, that equity that a startup basically gives you. If you can price that, how do you add that into your equation? I think it will actually be much more money than your side of it. Again, remember, this is beyond sort of the talk I'm doing now, but I'll give some resources sort of at the back end if you want to, or we can even do some questions on how to sort of, understand that equity piece of the side of it. The other thing I'm actually seeing now, and because of because of COVID and because of the hiring speed we're throwing on, I'm actually seeing prices, sort of equal out. And I don't know if you've seen that at all, Amanda, or if you've seen any research, but a number of CEOs I'm talking to right now are sort of telling me that the pay gap is not there anymore. And basically they have to pay them exactly what they would pay at a large startup, plus sort of that kicker of the equity or sort of the lottery ticket of a still side of it. So at that point, if we're still sort of in that realm, I think it's sort of a no reason at all basically side of it. So have you seen anything pricing on stuff, for startups or any side, if they're sort of the same price now, or if there's any research you guys have sort of seen, Amanda?
I can't say that I have firsthand, quite honestly, no.
Okay, but perfect.
I put my faith into what you're sharing by all means.
Well, again, this is very short term because it's like this is right, sort of like last couple of months I've seen talking to CEOs. So again, I know it's very hard to hire people right now. So it's, pricing is definitely going up, and hopefully it stays that same when you guys are looking for jobs. So this is another one I think is probably the last, sort of biggest bucket that everybody sort of tells you. And you may hear this from your parents, you may hear this from other people, that there's no career path. I think this is sort of gone. I hope it's gone now, basically, because, I think we saw at least through the 2008 downturn and some other side of it, that there's not a lot you can depend on basically now in the career path of even a large corporation or a small corporation. So I'd much rather bet on myself. And I think betting on yourself means that you have the skill sets and the understanding that you know about to get you that next job, whatever it is. So if you're betting on always the corporation sort of understanding what what skills you should have, I think that's sort of the wrong bet. And I think that's probably the wrong way to look at your career. You should always be betting on yourself and making sure you're investing in yourself. It's great when corporations do invest in you, but a lot of times they may investing for their own needs, where, if you bet on yourself, you're always going to be investing for what you think is going to be the next step basically in your career side of it. I think the best things, is the only important thing is learning the number of skills you can have and learning something that you think will be fun, interesting, and valuable for you sort of going forward in your career. what they say, they may promise you other careers, again, this is a lot of times in large corporations sort of out of your control. In a small company, you do have more influence, but again, if they grow, you're going to have a career path. And I think it's also, again, we took backside of it. I think it matters a lot to understand what you don't want to do. So as a startup, if you try marketing and sales and financials and anything, hiring and firing, you'll find out pretty quickly what, might be in your will set and what might not be in your will set. If you're in a large corporation sort of still siloed, you're not going to have that experience. So I think there's a lot of things you can sort of look at to make sure that you understand what you don't want to do along with what you want to do. And then the last one, no stability. We heard this all over, all over again, and again, it's the same sort of questions about, there's no career path. And I think experience is the best stability that we have. And your ability to learn, we'll go over sort of the best traits that a person at a start needs to have, but your ability to learn and sort of always looking at looking at a company a different way, I think is the best stability you're ever going to have in your career, because any company is going to be looking for somebody that can add value very quickly. And the only way you can do that is sort of keep on your toes and understanding what what's there. The other thing to understand is those big company jobs aren't going away. Again, you have all those resources with the universities, those career centers. Every university I know now is going to keep your career center open to alumni too. So let's, always make sure you sort of need those jobs are always going to be there. The startup may not be there basically, or your career may not be at the right spot where you can do a startup. So, and I still think the stability of a large company is a myth. We saw that through 2008. As people had to pivot, we're seeing even now as companies start to pivot where, certain industries are going away, certain ones are booming. You want to make sure that your stability is yourself, not the company you're actually tying yourself onto. So the next thing is, this is just sort of a graph that I always like to show, new graduates or graduate side of it. And this is how to think of your career. Basically early in your career, again, if you have the options, again, I know I'm talking, sometimes there's other things, with family and with, certain job priorities or even debt obligations, but you should be able to say yes very early in your career to everything. And that's another reason why to do startups, because again, they'll give you lots of options to say yes to, where a large company sometimes don't give you those yeses. As you get lower and lower, basically your options start, getting donor. Hopefully your life starts changing too also, and you may have obligations around, a mortgage, around other kids, around a partner basically, and their needs. That's when you probably start to say no to things. And then even late in your career like mine, it's a lot of no's because the options are, basically, all over the place. So, but again, I don't want to make generalities, and I know everybody's situation is different. But again, I think this is a great way to sort of look at your career and say, you want to say yes to everything, because you'll find out exactly what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and make it interesting for yourself too.
So Jeff, if you don't mind me interrupting you, we actually have a question about skill sets. Perfect. So the specific question is from an anonymous attendee who is asking, what are some specific transferable skills that you can take into another career? So
usually there are the hard skills. Again, there's always the hard skill of whatever you're doing in that corporation. Again, I'll sort of, generalize and say, those might be, hiring and firing that you won't get a large time as being a new person basically side of it. But you'll also get a whole bunch of soft skills basically that I think, help. And this is sort of leading right into, I love the question because it leads right into my next slide basically side of it, is that, you'll have a mindset going into a corporation, into even into a large corporation and say, what is the best thing for the corporation? Because if you're hanging with the owner, if you're hanging with Amy, Amy Sell working in a small organization, you understand what exactly, when you're not in when you're in a big corporation like GM or, even some of the other ones around town like U of M, you don't know exactly what the best thing for the large organization is. But once you get that mindset, you can start to understand. And I'll always say that, I mean, it might not be the best thing in the short term, but if you do the right thing for the corporation, I do think it's going to be the best thing for you in the long term, and that will be rewarded. Other than that, it still feels good to do the right thing for the corporation than it is the right thing for your side of it. The other thing you're going to get is a tolerance for risk. And again, I think this is something that you always have to push yourself on. And that's, we all like to sort of say that, we know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, but a startup, every day can be their best day of your life and can be the worst day of your life. So you'll understand those curveballs and start to, be ready for them when they're going to be tossed at you with a large corporation. They probably won't be as big, but I think that will also help you as an organization because you understand, how to deal with the change, how to deal with the risk. The other thing is working well with no direction. When a small organization, you're not going to get somebody walking over your side, over your shoulder, basically telling you exactly what to do. When you work with an organization, you may have that because they may have the resources basically to handhold you. In a small organization, you don't have that. So, you'll have to figure out, what do I have to do tomorrow? What do I need to do the desk side of it? And then also a biggest one is a bias toward action. Again, you may not have a decision, but I always think it's better to keep moving forward with whatever direction. You're always going to be, you may be off path, but you're always going to be much more forward than if you didn't move at all, basically. And every startup should be a bias for action, because if you don't do anything, all you're doing is burning capital basically at that point in cash. So they're usually very biased towards action. Again, I think all these things are going to help you in a large organization or your next job that you do it. And the quicker you learn them, I think the better you're going to be off competing with what you're doing to it. And the last one is the ability to look the job you were hired for. In a startup, there's tons of things to do, and it's basically sort of picking what you think is the best thing for the company. And again, you're acting like the CEO, sort of saying, hey, I think we need to hire somebody. I'm going to go, look for something. Or I think we're going to be needing somebody coming forward. I'm going to create my network so I have the right person basically in the organization. Or I think we need to make a new logo. Guess what? I'll go on Fiverr and create a bunch of logos and pick them together. Or I think we need a website. Go do that. So anytime you're doing that, even a large organization, I think it will be rewarded in the long term that they'll say, hey, there's somebody that can actually pick up any job, sort of, knows what's going to be the next step forward and sort of help those together. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, please come back. And if I didn't answer it well, come back in the next quick question and answer stuff. So, what do I think is the worst advice? I think the worst advice that we always give people is to follow your dreams. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but this is Nightmare on Elm Street and, classic horror movies. What happens when you follow your dreams? It becomes a nightmare, basically, side of it. So, I like the thought of it, basically like doing something that you like, but, your dreams sometimes don't meet with reality. So I think that, telling people to always follow your dreams is probably a recipe for disaster. If I have done that, I might have been a music major. Again, I like to play music, but again, that's probably not the best career that I could have had for my life, and I wouldn't have been a happy side of things. So, I think the answer to that, or the thing that I always like to tell people, is sort of a Venn diagram. You always take these three things into consideration. So, what will people pay you for? Again, you may like to, plant gardens, but again, what will people pay, and what will people pay you for that of the salary that basically you would like to have, basically. So always consider sort of understanding what the pay is. Again, you don't ever want to do things that suck. So again, that's the other side of it, where you can try in a bunch of roles and go, hey, I don't want to be a salesperson unless I really have to. That's sort of my line, where it's like, I'll do it, but I'm not going to be happy doing it. And I'd much rather sort of be looking at data analysis. And then there's things that you might be good at. Again, that you're trying on different roles. I'm not saying the things that you are good at, but things that you might be good at. Again, this, trying on a bunch of roles will tell you sort of, give you immediate feedback, basically side of it, side of it. So, hopefully that's a good framework that people sort of, look at, so than the, follow my dreams, go exactly where it follows me. If you take all those together and then sort of, plop in the middle, I think you'll find a big area of things that you can do, that you possibly can do, but that will, hopefully send you in a better direction than just follow your dreams. So the other question we get asked a lot, especially as venture capitalists, is sort of what areas are becoming hot. Again, I wouldn't say that you say I always want to do these roles, But, this is a good way to sort of say, hey, if I'm just starting university now, these are the places that venture capitalists are investing that probably they think are going to be hot in 5 to 7 years. So if you're looking, these are probably things that might be again, we choose wrong a lot of times. So I'm not saying you want to do these things, but if they follow you, if they're hype, if you're interested in any of these, I would say that they're good sides that may be really interesting. So ag tech is really interesting. And again, we're not talking about a lot of people like, down on the farm. A lot of times these are IT solutions for farming. These are robotic solutions for farming. There's a lot of, even now that we're taking biology and applying it to plant structure. So if you guys have heard of, DNA editing with CRISPR and things like that, we're doing this on plants now, in the startup realm. Again, this isn't really happening, but there's tons of robotics. So there's tons of great things. Digital health, again, you'll start to see that over and over again, where it's, you may not be, doing blood draws, but these are things applying artificial intelligence, machine learning to making things so much, better for. And again, the other side of that, actually, you do save lives too, which is a great thing to sort of have. The other side of it too is that this was a big digital health, had a huge boom. I think this was slides were done before the COVID. So digital health actually may be higher than agriculture. Vertical SaaS, again, it's a technical term, but it's basically saying you're taking everything sort of with software as a service and sort of rolling it up. Construction, again, we've got a lot of that sort of in Michigan. And again, this can be robotic construction, new construction. Again, it's going to be different because now that we're after COVID, we're going to have a whole different area sort of that we're running into. Synthetic biology, that's been hot. We all know that basically with Moderna and all these other things that we're having right now. And then low code, no code is sort of a great word that we're sort of had of where, everybody's using programming languages, but now they're using website. So hopefully this will, give you an idea of sort of saying, hey, if I don't really even know, these are things I can start to do research on, or I may want to take a course on, or I may want to talk to somebody in a coffee shop and say, hey, is that something that might be interesting or side of it? So at least gives you ways to point out. So hopefully that's interesting. So the next one that I have is, it's the question is like, what does venture capitalists do? And again, we're going to have a huge dive in. Hopefully you come to the talk Thursday with Chris Ryzik. He's my partner at Renaissance Venture Capital Fund, and he'll go much more deep into it. But the thing that always know is that venture capitalists is a hard role to get, basically. So it's not as easy as the same job that we're doing everywhere. You got to be pretty lucky basically to get the job. And I was lucky enough to sort of get the job and hold on to it for a really long time. The other thing to know is that there's the actual investing part of things. But again, we're just like a startup. My team, it was just Chris and I when we started, and we now have a team of 5. It still happens where it's like, we've got somebody doing HR, we got somebody doing IT service, we have somebody doing the hiring and firing. We're all still doing the roles along with, investing lots of money, but we're also doing the, making sure that our website is up. We're making sure that our events go off, all the things that basically the blocking and tackling that happen inside, all these small organizations. So last but not least, I think we're getting close, and hopefully we got a couple of good questions, or Amanda, we can come up with things to talk about. But I talked about, things that would, sort of help you along the way. That first line in the book side of it is venture deals. That sort of is my go-to book about, how to understand what happens in venture capital, how to sort of price your warrants or options or all those, those equity that you get in smaller companies. That's a pretty quick read that you have, and hopefully, even if you go to the library, you can go pick that book up. Another one is sort of how to understand what happens inside a small organization or startup is the hard things about hard things. Ben Horowitz has a couple books. I like all of them. If you like podcasts, there's a one called Startup. Basically, the first season of Startup is all about starting Gimlet Media. It's on Spotify now, and it's a pretty easy, quick read that you can get, quick listen in your car. I think it's like 10 episodes, basically an hour each, but sort of gives you a good picture into the ups and downs of actually starting a company and the things that you may not think about that happen that you really have to figure out pretty quickly if you run into. And then there's a, sort of famous venture capital and Andreessen Horowitz, they call A16Z because their names were so long. But they have a bunch of podcasts. If you go to the website and just Google A16Z podcast, you'll see a whole bunch of ones about different startups and all the things that we're doing. So again, we're even earlier than I thought, Amanda. And now we'll get to see how many questions we have or how well I did.
Well, and that's perfect. So we do actually have a couple of questions. So let's see. So we got one about 9 minutes ago. So the
Perfect.
question is, when looking for internships at startups, how do you know if they are a good or successful startup?
A lot of times, again, those news articles can help. Again, or you may look at if you're in university, there's resources that will tell you sort of, the best way to follow it is to follow the intelligent money, and the intelligent usually in these areas are venture capitalists. So if we're investing $90 million in a company, we don't think it's going to fail. We want our $90 million back with a multiple of that, and usually the multiple is probably 5 to 6x. So we're putting our real $90 million against that side of it. So if you look at, there's a database usually called PitchBook. There's Preqin. Those are two databases that you might have at your university, and you can sort of, look them up and see how much money. Again, just Google them. If you Google Strata Oncology, you'll see the $90 million round. You'll see the $23 million round. You'll start to see how much money basically venture capitalists have sort of invested. Again, the other thing also is just to ask normally those entrepreneurial support organizations. Amy sort of knows who's doing well and who's not doing well, because if she's hiring for people, it means that they're doing well. So you can get it sort of easy. And again, I would also say don't do too much research, because again, if you like the person, if you think it's interesting, if it's going to be something side of it that gives you lots of opportunities, and it's only for a year, I mean, that still is a great investment of your year, I would say, because even if it fails after that year, you're going to have learned so much. And especially even as a company starts to shut down, there's a whole bunch of learnings that happen at that point too. Shutting down companies is a whole different art that I don't like to go through, but it is definitely a skill set, and it will help you basically as you go along.
Thank you. That's awesome. And then I like to add that when I was researching different companies and looking for work, I also enjoyed looking at their ratings on such as Glassdoor, but kind of like Jeff said, you have to be a little careful when you're doing some of this research, because especially even just like restaurant reviews, you'll get some bias in there. So tread carefully, but it can be helpful.
Amanda, that's amazing. That's, and I like to say also that it's like, there are no perfect companies. I mean, we look at and we look outside and we see, Google is amazing, or even Renaissance is amazing. It's like, no, every company sort of has a personality, and you've got to make sure that personality sort of meshes with your personality. Line sort of is like everybody has baggage. You're just looking for matching baggage. If a company, likes to party hard and likes to have work all the time and that may be great for you as a personality, or it may be great for you as your certain side of it. When you're older, that may not be great. Or if you're a homebody, or, you got to make sure that the personality, especially in a small organization, that sort of meshes with your personality. So again, you may read something and go, okay, I can see why that's true, but I like that, where this person didn't like that, sort of on Glassdoor. So I would always take everything with a grain of salt. And, any large corporations, they have some negatives on them. They should,
Absolutely. Then our other question is, are there any small businesses that we should avoid completely and are not worth the risk?
I would say no. I mean, again, I would do this, the same pitch, that the answer that I had before. I mean, even if it isn't a perfect fit for you, or doesn't make sense for you, or again, you're only there for a year, I think you're going to learn so much basically in that year, that I think the risks outweigh the advantage. But again, I'm talking from my experience. And again, you have to always evaluate what you're doing, what your need for capital is, what your home life is, where you are sort of in your life. We had sort of the saying basically back. It was like, lean in was the term, based on a book side of it. There are times your life is not always up and to the right, and your personal life maybe up and to the right, and then your career life may be up, maybe just on simmer. You'll see nothing's a clear step function. Sometimes it will go really high and then drop down a couple spots and then go right back up again. So look at it sort of where you are in your life and what you need sort of at this point. And again, don't be afraid to sort of say, hey, this is a bad fit and it's not fitting for me. I'm going to go somewhere else. There's lots of fish in the sea. And right now, particularly, there's a lot of jobs out there for people with your education and the things that you guys have just learned through your internship. So, it's never done.
And then we welcome any other questions that anyone has, whether it's about looking for jobs, venture capital, or startups, or anything else, by all means. So but while we're waiting on some more questions to trickle in, Jeff, what is your favorite part about working for Renaissance right now?
For Renaissance right now, I mean, the best thing it always I cite is that I get to see the future before everybody else does. So, venture capital itself, basically, we're always looking out, 5 to 7, sometimes 12 years, basically, in the future. So I get to see all these things before they're actually, interesting. So my fun story right now is basically we invested in a venture capital fund called Flagship. And I don't know if you knew about it, but Flagship started Moderna. So, I watched Moderna go from, 2 people, with a little bit of venture capital investment now to, I think it's $150 billion corporation with a name that, everybody knows, and Jimmy Kimmel's doing jokes about them. Basically everybody knows who Moderna was. I knew Moderna basically when it was nothing. So it's very cool sort of seeing that. That's a sort of a moonshot sort of, example, but there's tons of examples like that where it's like, you get to see something and you got to say, there's been companies like, Cloudflare that everybody uses on the internet now that I got to see beforehand. There's tons of examples like that, but that's probably the most, gratifying, the most interesting to sort of see. But sometimes the failures can be as interesting as the successes, and trying to figure out why they failed. And sometimes, there's a lot of them, I don't even know why they failed, basically. Usually that means it's the timing, the market's not ready, and they're actually going to be taken at some point. So hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And then so would you give us a glimpse into what your typical day looks like?
Yeah, my day is, it's shifted over the time frame. So my main role inside, what's sort of advertised on my, on my bio on Renaissance is that I look for all the deal flow. So, my partner, Chris Ryzik, is primarily the fundraiser. I'm mostly the person picking the fund, but that doesn't mean I do it in myself. Chris has input a lot of times into, almost all the time into funds that we have. We have another partner called Vince Nystrom. He has input into it, but my main job is to understand that I understand the, what funds that we can invest in, sort of monitoring the funds we're into. Other than that, a lot of my role is basically talking to startups, talking to other venture capital funds. I think I have 5 or 6 venture capital funds I'm talking to this week, making sure I'm updated on where they are in sort of the fundraising. The other things I do is, when it was just both of us, I was sort of the back office person. So we now have a CFO, but, I still, help her out basically, it's sort of a backup, sort of as the check of her work to make sure things go out. So I still have all those reporting. The bad part of it, or the job that part of the job is interesting, might be interesting to other people, but isn't my favorite part of the job, is that all the networking we have to do. So we do a lot of speeches like this, I love to do them, but they're not my favorite part of it. The other part of it is all the networking we do. So we usually have, there's entrepreneurs, organizations, and they're all having events. So we try to go to, as many as we can. And, there's 3 or 4 this week. So there'll be A2 New Tech Meetup. There'll be Detroit New Tech Meetup. There'll be, a pitch event out in Kalamazoo. And, when they weren't virtual, we were driving everywhere. If not, and those events usually go on from 5 to 8 o'clock at night. So a lot of times we're out on the road, or we're doing things on the road. It's great. You get to meet a lot of people, but it does eat up a lot of time, basically, and I'm not as home as I'd like to sometimes.
Well, and that's interesting that you can be out so late and then on the road sometimes. And that brings me into another question I wanted to ask. And so, work-life balance has been a hot topic for a long time, quite frankly, but I feel like perhaps even more in the last year, especially with a lot of people switching to remote work or hybrid work and kind of balancing between all that. So how do you, or maybe how do you recommend to our young adults how to manage their work-life balance?
I'm not a very good example of that. I love my work. I'm sorry. My wife works a lot too. We both are people that, that like to work. The good news is basically, and why it's such a great job is, there are very little, emergencies in venture capital. I mean, there are things that need to happen very quickly, but I always judge, a job by how many people that can sort of, tell you what you're going to do, in the next 5 minutes or the next hour. When you're in a startup, there's a lot of people that can do that. You have investors, you have customers, you have even employees. Again, especially in the job market now, where it's like, employees have a lot of sway more than they thought of, basically, inside of it. So as a startup person, when I was doing those jobs, there was a lot of people that could sort of tell you or basically tell you you're working tonight, and you would say yes, because for this, it's, my limited partners are probably the only people who can do that. Again, that doesn't mean I don't work hard, but I work hard basically on my own time. If I want to work hard tonight, I can plan it, and I'm going to, I'll work, long hours. If I don't want to work tonight, I can usually plan it that I don't have to. So that means I can go to my kids' things. I can do, I can do side of it. But I sit in front of the computer at night and do, quite a bit of work, sit in front of the TV. I like that. That's sort of my, my choice to do that. It also is, it's highly fulfilling for me because, again, I can see the output of that. So, but it was interesting to see how much changed over the during COVID. We had much more partners basically that wanted to work even on the weekends. So I think we're all still figuring this out. But I'm not too worried about my ability to sort of do it because I like this stuff.
That's perfect. And right, absolutely. It can be, and it's something that occurs the late hours and the weekend work sometimes, regardless of company size, but I can see it in its own niche, if you will, being particularly prevalent in a startup, because
Without a doubt.
it's
Yep.
extra work that kind of has to get done to continue that success or to build and continue to grow.
Yep, without a doubt. But again, I would go back to, I don't mind working hard. I usually like working hard on, on my time. I mean, that's my biggest thing is it's when it's somebody else's, agenda or that I have to work hard that it becomes, if it's all the time, it becomes much more troublesome.
Right, absolutely. And not missing a birthday party or
Exactly.
whatever big
Without
life
the
event.
things that are important to you,
Right.
your partner, all those things that you, or even sometimes that, I mean, it's stupid things. It's, the things that you like in life. I mean, if you like a movie premiere or something, like you want to see a movie, that's what you want to do. There's certain things that we like, or a football game or a golf game. I mean, it's whatever you do to recharge, basically, side of it. So.